Mr. President, many who are filibustering this defense appropriation bill tonight are filibustering because they want to delay health care. And they want to delay the health care reform legislation from being voted on. So the bill that provides the funding to support our men and women in uniform who are serving on the front lines, often under arduous and dangerous circumstances, to protect our nation, is being filibustered to keep the Senate from acting on another unrelated piece of legislation. This is not only unbelievable, it is unconscionable. A 3.4% pay raise for the troops is being filibustered. Additional funding for needed medical research in traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress syndrome, and to improve the care, the medical care for our wounded warriors, is being filibustered tonight. Funding to provide over 6,000 MRAP vehicles. Those are the mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles that are so desperately needed by our troops in Afghanistan, is being filibustered tonight. $1.8 million, $1.8 billion for the joint, what is called the Joint IED Organization, which has one purpose, one mission, and that is to develop and deploy technologies to protect our troops from the deadly improvised explosive devices that have maimed and killed so many, is being filibustered here tonight. $470 million for family advocacy programs and full funding for family support and yellow ribbon programs to provide support to military families, including quality child care, job training for spouses, expanded counseling and outreach to families experiencing the separation and the strain and the stress of war, is being filibustered here tonight. What in the world kind of message does a filibuster like this send to our troops? Our troops deserve the full support, and they should know that they have the full support of the Congress when they are in the field, carrying out the democratically arrived at policies and decisions of our government. Instead, what they're getting tonight is a Republican filibuster. And now those who are filibustering this defense bill because they think that they're aiming at health care reform are tragically off target. They are hitting our troops and their families. How in the name of heaven should the well-being of our troops be sacrificed for 1 hour when they are sacrificing so much for us day after day? Now, there are those who are going to argue that the end that they seek, the delay of the health care reform bill, justifies the means that they are using, holding hostage the critical funding to support our troops and their families. I couldn't disagree more. The lesson that our troops are going to take from the filibusters tonight is that those who are filibustering this bill think that a short-term political objective is more important than a prompt vote of support and confidence for our military members and their families. Just yesterday, the ranking Republican member of the Appropriations Committee said the following: this appropriations bill, this defense appropriations bill, quote, ought to be passed, and it ought to be passed as soon as possible, he said, in recognition of our respect for service members and their families, close quote. Well, our respect for our troops and the sacrifice that they and their families make for our country every day is exactly why this filibuster should be defeated tonight. Those who are filibustering this bill because they want to delay a vote on health care legislation should end that filibuster out of respect for our troops and their families. Out of respect for our troops and their families, and for the sacrifices that they make for this country every day. Let the Senate defeat this filibuster tonight. And the stakes, Mr. President, are huge, and they were set forth in a letter which we received from the Secretary of Defense. And this is what the Secretary of Defense is telling us. This is what the stakes are. Quote, I'm writing to advise you of my serious concern over the prospect that fiscal year 2010 appropriation authority for the Department of Defense could expire by Friday, December 18th, 2009. That's today. And he goes on, should we face this unfortunate situation, it would result in a serious disruption in the worldwide activities of the Department of Defense and limit our ability to pay our workforce, including military forces. I'm going to repeat this. This is what our Secretary of Defense is saying, and he is not someone who shoots from the hip. Our Secretary of Defense is one of the most serious-minded, careful secretaries of any agency that I have ever known. The Secretary of Defense says the following, and I'm going to repeat it because I want everyone to know what the stakes are tonight if we do not defeat this filibuster. Should we face this unfortunate situation, he wrote, it would result in a serious disruption in the worldwide activities of the Department of Defense and limit our ability to pay our workforce, including military forces. And he concludes, it is inconceivable to me, Secretary Gates says, that such a situation would be permitted to occur with U.S. forces actively deployed in combat. Accordingly, I strongly urge the Congress to do what is necessary to ensure the Department has the needed resources to fully and appropriately continue its vital national mission. Signed, Robert Gates. I hope every one of us, before they decide whether to continue this filibuster or not, will read this letter from Secretary Gates and think about what the message is to our troops and their families. If an unrelated issue, as important as that issue is allowed to interfere with us appropriating the necessary funds for the men and women who put the uniform of this nation on, who take that risk for us, let us remember that as we vote tonight and understand what the stakes are if this filibuster succeeds.